Okay, today we're jumping into what might be the most fascinating book in the New Testament, the Gospel of Mark. It's the oldest, the shortest, and by far the most mysterious account of Jesus' life. Reading it feels less like a formal biography and more like a breathless, urgent report from the front lines. So our mission here is to play detective. Who wrote this thing? Why did they write it with such urgency? And what's the deal with that really shocking ending? First things first, you gotta get a feel for this book. The Gospel of Mark is just different. It's not like the others. It's abrupt, it's all action, and it moves at this incredible breakneck speed. It almost feels like the author is in a desperate hurry to get this story out into the world. And think about it like this. If other Gospels are like formal biographies, with long teaching sections and genealogies, Mark's Gospel is a straight-up action movie. It's all about what Jesus did. In fact, the author's favorite word is immediately. He uses it over 40 times. It's just bang, bang, bang. One incredible event right after the other, constantly pushing the story forward. So if you put all these clues together, here are the key things that make Mark stand out. It's the shortest. It's almost certainly the first one written. And it is obsessed with action over long speeches. It's not really a detailed history. A lot of scholars described it more like a snapshot album, just giving you these incredibly vivid pictures of Jesus' most powerful moments. And get this, the date is absolutely crucial. Most experts believe it was written between 65 and 70 AD. That is so close to the events themselves. We're talking within a single generation of Jesus' life, which makes this one of our earliest and most important sources for what happened. So all of this, the incredible speed, the focus on action, that super early date, it all leads us to the central mystery. Who is the person behind this totally unique account? And why did they write it in this very specific, very urgent way? That's the question we're going to try and answer. All right, so let's start playing detective. Who actually wrote this thing? Well, we can start by looking at the prime suspect, the person identified by the earliest Christian writers. Now, the gospel itself is technically anonymous. The author never signs his name. But very early and very widespread, tradition points to one guy, a man named John Mark. He wasn't one of the original 12 apostles, but he was a really important figure moving around in the background of the early church. And John Mark had a pretty wild ride. He started out as an assistant to the apostles Paul and Barnabas on their first big missionary trip. But then he famously bailed on them halfway through, caused a huge fight. But he eventually reconciled with Paul and became a really valued helper. But here's the key connection for our investigation, his final role as the interpreter for the Apostle Peter in Rome. And this right here, this is the smoking gun. It's a quote from a bishop named Papias, writing around 140 AD. And he says it plainly. Mark wrote down the story as he heard it directly from Peter. This explains everything. It explains that vivid, you are there, eyewitness feel of the gospel. It's not just Mark's story. It's Peter's memories, poured out and shaped into this fast-moving narrative. Okay, so we've got a likely author, John Mark, and an incredible source, the Apostle Peter. But that just answers the who. We still need to ask why. Why this story, told this way, at this exact moment in history? And the answer, it turns out, has everything to do with the audience. The overwhelming consensus is that Mark was writing from Rome to the Christian community living there, and this was not a good time to be a Christian in Rome. This was the time of Emperor Nero, a period of intense, brutal, and violent persecution. These people were a church in crisis. And we can actually see the fingerprints of that Roman audience all over the text. The author is constantly stopping to explain Jewish customs that a non-Jewish reader just wouldn't get. He translates Aramaic phrases, the language Jesus spoke, into Greek. He even uses Latin words that were common in Rome, like census for a tax or centurio for a Roman soldier. These little details are the clues that point directly to his intended readers. So here's the bottom line. Mark isn't just telling a story for the history books. He's sending an urgent message of encouragement. To a church that was literally facing suffering and death, he shows them a powerful Messiah who also faced constant opposition, who was misunderstood, and who ultimately suffered. He was giving them a model for how to hold on. So we've got the who, the where, and the why. But to really get this gospel, we have to look at the how, the unique themes and secrets that Mark weaves into the story itself. And these aren't just details, they're the whole point of the message. The most famous one is this idea scholars call the messianic secret. It's kind of strange, right? Over and over, Jesus will perform some incredible miracle, and then he immediately tells the people, shh, don't tell anyone who I am. So why all the secrecy? Because the title Messiah came with all this political and military baggage. Mark's point is that you couldn't possibly understand who Jesus really was until after his suffering, his death, and his resurrection. And Mark really drives this point home by contrasting two titles. He starts the book by calling Jesus the powerful Son of God, but Jesus' favorite title for himself, the humble Son of Man, a phrase deeply connected with lowliness and suffering. Mark is completely redefining what true power looks like. It's not about domination, it's about service and sacrifice. And then there's this other theme, and honestly, it's pretty shocking. The disciples, they are constantly messing up. They're portrayed as dense, they're fearful, and they just don't get what Jesus is doing. You have to imagine for that original audience in Rome, who were probably feeling like they were failing under pressure, this was a really comforting message. Hey, even the guys closest to Jesus struggled, but he never gave up on them. Okay, this brings us to the final and maybe the most fascinating piece of the puzzle, the Gospel's original ending. Because I've got some news for you. The ending that you read in most Bibles today, that's not how the story originally finished. Here's what the evidence tells us. Our oldest and most reliable copies of Mark's Gospel stop dead at chapter 16, verse 8. The women go to the tomb, it's empty, an angel tells them Jesus is risen and that they need to go tell the disciples. But instead, they run away terrified and, it says, they said nothing to anyone. Full stop. The end. The longer endings you see today were added centuries later, probably by scribes who just couldn't handle such an abrupt, unsettling conclusion. But what if that shocking cliffhanger wasn't a mistake? What if it was the entire point? The story just stops, right at a moment of failure and fear. The women, who have been the most faithful followers this whole time, are given the mission to spread the good news, and they're too scared to do it. And that right there is the Gospel's final brilliant challenge. The story is left unfinished on purpose. Mark turns from the characters in the story to his persecuted readers in Rome, and by extension to us today, and he basically asks, the first messengers were too afraid to speak, the mission failed, the story is in your hands now, so what are you going to do about it? It's a powerful, provocative question that makes the reader the final character in the story.